Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all. Bismillah. In the name of Allah, God. What is hijab? Hijab, as we are referring to it here, is the covering and outer garments which Muslim women wear. Today, inshallah, God willing, to give you an overall idea of the hijab, I'm going to talk about number 1, personal experiences, number 2, give a recommendation to politicians, 3, mention a couple of evidences for hijab, 4, give some hijab advice, and 5, some general advice. Okay, number 1, starting with personal experiences. The day I became Muslim, I was informed that Allah, God, has commanded the Muslim women to cover themselves. I wanted to obey God, and my new Muslim friends gave me a couple of scarves and a long coat to start with. When I left that day wearing the hijab, the effect this had on me was surprising. But to give you the full picture, let me describe a little of my life before that. Some people considered me to be beautiful, and to get ahead in my career, I was expected to dress appropriately. Dressing appropriately really depends on trends and ladies' fashions, which of course is to look your best. So as any woman with an ounce of beauty can testify, this would undoubtedly draw attention from men. You know, a wolf whistle here and then a few turned heads. And the columnists say men think about it, you know, their desires, how many times a day? So this might have seemed flattering occasionally, but it disturbed me many other times. I thought I should be able to wear what I want, and at the same time I thought that I should be respected. But then there were these louts yelling out, "Show us your tees," and those old pervs, the way they look at you, and you know what they're thinking about. Yuck. Back to the day I became Muslim. I was in a foreign country, and I was drawing too much attention from the local residents and feeling very disturbed by it. But after I came out wearing a scarf, now all of a sudden no one was looking. I felt so overwhelmed with relief I cried. I was grateful to God. I felt respected and free from men's desires. When I returned back to my country, there were no more wolf whistles. I felt free. But of course occasionally I hear the odd "F off back to your own country," but I know that's not really aimed at me, otherwise they'd tell me to go find a new country. At some stage I was also shown a verse from the Bible in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 5. "But every woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered has dishonoured her head, for that is as if she were shaven." I thought that was interesting, as now I pray and cover. As I became involved in the Muslim community, I again started to feel men looking at me. May Allah forgive us and guide us, we all have our shortcomings. So I discovered the niqab, face covering. After I started wearing the niqab, I started getting total respect. Men now step aside and lower their gaze. MashaAllah. But as for my parents, they are not so happy. People used to prevent girls from dressing sexily, but now they're happy to see that. Isn't it strange how our standard of dress has changed over time? Okay, number 2, my recommendation for politicians. I appreciate that you may be genuinely looking out for my best interests, and that you just aren't aware of how I really feel. And I used to have the same outlook before Islam. But honestly, through all your good intentions, many of you may actually be taking away the freedom I have, the freedom not to get those dirty looks, the freedom to be respected. If any one of you would really like to give us rights by supporting and voting in new laws, all I ask is that you interview us. If you honestly don't want us to be oppressed, then please don't assume to know our position, and just try to verify the facts from us. You wouldn't want to be the ones oppressing us, would you? Okay, number 3, evidences for hijab. There are many, but I will only draw attention to 2 verses from the Quran and 2 hadith, which is a narration linked back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Allah is instructing us to draw our cloaks around ourselves. In the Quran chapter 33 verse 59, "O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the believing women to draw their cloaks over themselves. That will be better, that they should be known and not be harmed. And Allah is the most forgiving, the most merciful. Now look at the verse where it says, not to be harmed. Would this be a protection from rape? Let's take a look at the mode of dress in our societies 100 years ago and the percentage of rape cases. Now look at our standard of dress today and all the rape victims, not to mention the amount of sexual assault attacks by the medical professionals that we trust. That is because when a man sees a woman in tight clothes, it arouses his lusts. But when a woman is wearing hijab, it prevents this, and therefore she would not be provoking men who feel suppressed to harm her. There is a hadith about showing only the hands and faces, and the following verse, 24:31, translated as, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their private parts, and not show off their adornments, except that which is apparent, and to draw their veils all over their juyub, their necks and breasts, and not to reveal their adornment except to their husbands, fathers, father-in-laws, sons, nephews, brothers. The verse continues. This verse was clarified by this authentic hadith, Bukhari, volume 6, number 282, narrated by Safiya bint Shayba. Aisha used to say, when the verse, they should draw their veils over their necks and breasts, was revealed, the ladies cut their waist sheets at the edges and covered their faces with the cut pieces. I'll come back to this topic in item 5, but now on to number 4, which is the hijab advice. So with all of this in mind, my advice to my sisters who are new to Islam or returning to Islam: first, try to adopt the hijab of Mary. Mary was the virgin mother of Jesus, and she was the greatest woman to ever live, and a great example for us all. But just take care of the recent depictions showing her hair, etc. Imagine Mary as the leader of the nuns, and she was more righteous than all of them. So as a basic guide, their hair should be covered. The covering should conceal the figure. It shouldn't be tight or see-through. The colour is not important, but it shouldn't be too bright. It shouldn't be shiny or decorated. As in the verse, we need to cover our adornments. So it doesn't make sense to cover adornments with adornments, does it? And to my sisters wanting to cover their face, remember that safety comes first. If you are taking care of children in a crowded place or walking in rocky areas, etc., then it is not advisable to cover your eyes. The last piece of advice, number 5. Back to the topic of evidence of hijab. There are many more hadith and discussions regarding this topic, and if we reflect on this following verse in the Quran, chapter 67, verse 10, which translates as, and they will say, had we but listened or used our intelligence, we would not have been among the dwellers of the blazing fire. This implies that we must use our intelligence and not just follow people blindly, and this applies to everything, not just hijab. So we need to study our religion. We wouldn't want to find ourselves in the wrong place because we listened to the wrong person, would we? And we just have to compare the hijab worn in Pakistan and the hijab worn in Jordan to know that culture has affected the hijab. So may Allah, God, forgive us all for our shortcomings and make it easy for us to dress modestly and behave in a manner that pleases Him. Ameen. Jazakumullah khaira. May Allah reward you all with good.